Hello, my friends. It's Miss Turner checking in on Thursday, April 9th. It is our first day of spring break, and I am so excited to start a new novel with you. We're going to begin a new text together, and it's called Fuzzy Mud. I love the suspense in this story. I feel like when the chapters end, it's one of those books that you're like, no, I want to keep going. So I'm really excited to share this book with you today. We're going to start doing our read aloud, and just like when we read Because of Mr. Tourette, I'm going to continue to post one in the morning, one in the afternoon, every day, so we can do our read aloud together. I really hope that you love this story just as much as I do, because it leaves me hanging on every word. If you're ready, we're going to go ahead and begin Fuzzy Mud. What's neat about this text is that every chapter is the date and also the time. So we're starting off Tuesday, November 2nd at 11:55 a.m. Woodridge Academy, a private school in Heathcliff, Pennsylvania, had once been the home of William Heath, after whom the town had been named. Nearly 300 students now attended school in the 4-story, black and brown stone building where William Heath had lived from 1891 to 1917, with only his wife and 3 daughters. Tamaya Duali's 5th grade classroom on the 4th floor had been the youngest daughter's bedroom. The kindergarten area had once been the stables. The lunchroom used to be the grand ballroom, where elegantly dressed couples had sipped champagne and danced to a live orchestra. Crystal chandeliers still hung from the ceiling, but these days the room permanently smelled of stale macaroni and cheese. 289 kids, ages 5 to 14, crammed their mouths with Cheetos, made jokes about boogers, spilled milk, and shrieked for no apparent reason. Tamaya didn't shriek, but she did gasp very quietly as she covered her mouth with her hand. "He's got this super long beard," a boy was saying, "splotched all over with blood. And no teeth," another boy added. They were boys from the upper grades. Tamaya felt excited just talking to them, although, so far, she'd been too nervous to actually say anything. She'd been sitting in the middle of a long table, eating lunch with her friends Monica, Hope, and Summer. One of the older boy's legs was only inches away from hers. "The guys can't chew his own food," said the first boy, "so his dogs have to chew it up for him. Then they spit it out, and then he eats it." "That's so disgusting!" exclaimed Monica. But from the way her eyes shone when she said it, Tamaya could tell that her best friend was just as excited as she was to have the attention of the older boys. The boys had been telling the girls all about a deranged hermit who lived in the woods. Tamaya didn't believe half of what they said. She knew boys liked to show off. Still, it was fun to let herself get caught up in it. "Except they're not really dogs," said the boy sitting next to Tamaya. "They're more like wolves, big and black with giant fangs and glowing red eyes." Tamaya shuddered. Woodbridge Academy was surrounded by miles of woods and rocky hills. Tamaya walked to school every morning with Marshall Walsh, a 7th grade boy who lived 3 houses down from her on the other side of their tree-lined street. Their walk was almost 2 miles long, but it would have been a lot shorter if they hadn't had to circle around the woods. "So what does he eat?" asked Summer. The boy next to Tamaya shrugged. "Whatever his wolves bring him," he said. "Squirrels, rats, people. He doesn't care just as long as it's food." The boy took a big bite of his tuna sandwich and then imitated the hermit by curling his lips so that it looked like he didn't have any teeth. He opened and closed his mouth in an exaggerated manner, showing Tamaya his partially chewed food. "You're so gross!" exclaimed Summer from the other side of Tamaya. All the boys laughed. Summer was the prettiest of Tamaya's friends, with straw-colored hair and sky-blue eyes. Tamaya figured that was probably the reason the boys were talking to them in the first place. Boys were always acting silly around Summer. Tamaya had dark eyes and dark hair that hung only halfway down her neck. It used to be a lot longer, but 3 days before school started, while she was still in Philadelphia with her dad, she made the drastic decision to chop it off. Her dad took her to a very posh hair salon he probably couldn't afford. As soon as she got it cut, she was filled with regret. But when she got back to Heathcliff, her friends all told her how mature and sophisticated she looked now. Her parents were divorced. She spent most of the summer with her dad and one weekend each month during the school year. Philadelphia was on the opposite end of the state, 300 miles away. When she returned home to Heathcliff, she always had the feeling that she'd missed something important while she's been gone. It might have been nothing more than an inside joke that her friends all laughed at, but she always felt a little left out, and it took her a while to get back into the groove. "He came this close to eating me," said one of the boys, a tough-looking kid with short black hair and a square face. "A wolf snapped at my leg as I was climbing back over the fence." The boy stood on top of the bench and showed the girls his pant leg for proof. It was covered in dirt, and Tamaya could see a small hole just above his sneaker. But that could have come from anything. Besides, she thought, if he'd been running away from a wolf, then the hole would have been in the back of his pants, not in the front. The boy stared down at her. He had blue, steel-like eyes, and Tamaya got the feeling that he could read her mind and was daring her to say something. She swallowed and said, "You're not really allowed in the woods." The boy laughed, and then the other boys laughed too. "What are you going to do?" he challenged. "Tell Mrs. Thaxton?" She felt her face redden. "No." "Don't listen to her," said Hope. "Tamaya's a really goody two-shoes." The words stung. Just a few seconds earlier, she had been feeling so cool talking with the older boys. Now they were all looking at her as she was just some kind of freak. She tried making a joke out of it. "I guess I'll only wear my own one shoe from now on." Nobody laughed. "You're kind of a goody-goody," said Monica. Tamaya bit her lip. She didn't get why what she had said had been so wrong. After all, Monica and Summer had just called the boys disgusting and gross. But somehow that was okay. If anything, the boys seemed proud that the girls thought they were disgusting and gross. When did the rules change, she wondered. When did it become bad to be good? Across the lunchroom, Marshall Wash sat amid a bunch of kids, all laughing and loudly talking. On one side of Marshall sat one group. On the other side sat a different group. Between these two groups, Marshall silently ate alone. Chapter 2. Sunray Farm. In a secluded valley 33 miles northwest of Woodridge Academy was Sunray Farm. You wouldn't know it was a farm if you saw it. There were no animals, no green pastures, and no crops. At least, none that grew big enough for anyone to see with the naked eye. Instead, what you would see, if you made it past the armed guards, past the electric fence topped with barbed wire, past the alarms and the security cameras, would be rows and rows of giant storage tanks. You also wouldn't be able to see the network of tunnels and underground pipes connecting the storage tanks to the main laboratory, also underground. Hardly anyone in Heathcliff knew about Sunray Farm, and certainly not Tamaya or her friends. Those who had heard of it had only had vague ideas about what was going on there. They might have heard of bioline, but probably didn't know exactly what it was. A little more than a year before, that is, about a year before Tamaya cut her hair and started the 5th grade, the United States Senate Committee of Energy and Environment held a series of secret hearings regarding Sunray Farm and bioline. The following testimony is excerpted from that inquiry. You see it's broken down by a person who's saying it. Senator Wright. You worked at Sunray Farm for 2 years before being fired, is that correct? Dr. Mark Hummard. No, that is not correct. They never fired me. Senator Wright. I'm sorry, I had been informed. Dr. Mark Hummard. Well, they might have tried to fire me, but I'd already quit. I just hadn't told anyone yet. Senator Wright. I see. Senator Foote. But you no longer work there. Dr. Mark Hummard. I couldn't be in the same room with Fitzy a minute longer. That man's crazy. And when I say crazy, I mean 100% bananas. Senator Wright. Are you referring to Jonathan Fitzman, the inventor of bioline? Dr. Mark Hummard. Everyone thinks he's some kind of genius. But who did all the work? Me. That's who. Or at least I would have if they had let me. He'd pace around the lab, muttering to himself, his arms flailing. It was impossible for the rest of us to concentrate. He'd sing songs. And if you asked him to stop, he'd look at you like you were the one who was crazy. He wouldn't even know he was singing. And then, out of the blue, he'd slap the side of his head and shout, "No, no, no!" And suddenly I'd have to stop everything I'd been working on and start all over again. Senator Wright. Yes, we've heard that Mr. Fitzman can be a bit eccentric. Senator Foot. Well, which is one reason why we're concerned about Bioline. Is it truly a viable alternative to gasoline? Senator Wright. This country needs clean energy, but is it safe? Dr. Mark Hummard. Clean energy? Is that what they're calling it? There's nothing clean about it. It's an abomination of nature. You want to know what they're doing at Sunray Farm? You really want to know? Because I know. I know. Senator Foot. Yes, we want to know. That's why we've called you in here before this committee, Mr. Hummard. Dr. Mark Hummard. Doctor. Senator Foot. Excuse me? Dr. Mark Hummard. It's Dr. Hummard, not Mr. Hummard. I have a PhD in microbiology. Senator Wright. Our apologies. Tell us, please, Dr. Hummard, what are they doing at Sunray Farm that you find so abominable? Dr. Mark Hummard. They've created a new form of life, never seen before. Senator Wright. A kind of high-energy bacteria, as I understand it, to be used as fuel. Dr. Mark Hummard. Not bacteria. Slime mold. People always confuse the two. Both are microscopic, but they are really quite different. We began with a simple slime mold, but Fitzy altered the DNA to create something new. A single-celled living creature that is totally unnatural to this planet. Sunray Farm is now growing these man-made microorganisms, these tiny Frankensteins, so they can burn them alive inside automobile engines. Senator Foot. Burn them alive? Don't you think that's a bit strong, Dr. Hummard? We're talking about microbes here. After all, every time I wash my hands or brush my teeth, I kill hundreds of thousands of bacteria. Dr. Mark Hummard. Just because they're small doesn't mean their lives aren't worthwhile. Sunray Farm is creating life for the sole purpose of destroying it. Senator Wright. But isn't that what all farmers do? Chapter 3. Tuesday, November 2nd, 2:55 p.m. After school, Tamaya waited by the bike racks for Marshall. The racks were empty. Most of the students at Woodridge Academy lived too far to ride their bikes, and there were no school buses for the private school. A line of cars extended the circular driveway up Woodridge Lane toward Richmond Road. As Tamaya watched the other kids climb into cars and drive off, she wished she had a ride too. She was already dreading the long walk home. It would feel even longer with a backpack full of books. Her face still burned with shame every time she thought about what had happened in the lunchroom. She was mad at Hope for saying what she said, and even madder at Monica, who was supposed to be her best friend and who should have stuck up for her. So, she was a good girl. So what? What was wrong with that? Being good was partly what Woodridge Academy was all about. The students all wore uniforms, khaki pants, a blue sweater for boys, plaid skirts, and maroon sweaters for girls. Embroidered on each sweater, right under the name of the school, were the words virtue and valor. Besides learning about history and math and all that, students at Woodridge Academy also were learning about to be virtuous. The school was supposed to teach them how to be good people. When Tamaya was in second grade, she had to memorize a list of 10 virtues: charity, cleanliness, courage, empathy, grace, humility, integrity, patience, prudence, and temperance. This year, she was learning their synonyms and antonyms. But if you actually tried to be good, Tamaya thought bitterly, everyone acted like you were some kind of freak. Marshall came out of the building. His hair was a mess, and his sweater, stretched out of shape, seemed to hang crookedly. She didn't wave. He came toward her, then trudged on past with hardly a glance. Marshall had a rule. They weren't supposed to act like friends around school. They were just two kids who walked to school together because they had to. They definitely were not boyfriend and girlfriend, and Marshall didn't want anyone thinking they were. Tamaya was surprised, however, because he wasn't going the usual way. Normally they headed up Woodridge Lane and turned right at Richmond Road. Instead, Marshall was heading towards the side of the school. She adjusted her backpack, then caught up with him. "Where are you going?" "Home," he said, as if she just asked a really stupid question. "But I'm taking a shortcut," he snapped. That didn't make any sense. They'd walked the same way every single day for the last 3 years. How could he suddenly know a shortcut? He continued around the side of the school toward the back. He was taller than she was and was walking quickly. Tamaya struggled to keep up. "How do you suddenly know a shortcut?" she asked. He stopped and turned on her. "I don't suddenly know about it," he said. "I've known about it my whole life." That didn't make any sense either. "If you want to take the slow way home, that's up to you," Marshall said. "No one's making you come with me." That wasn't really true, and he knew it. Her mother didn't allow her to walk home alone. "I'm going with you, aren't I?" Tamaya said. "Well, then quit being a baby about it," said Marshall. She stayed with him as they crossed the blacktop and then went onto the soccer field. All she'd done was ask how he knew a shortcut, she thought. How was that being a baby? Marshall kept glancing behind him. Every time he looked back, Tamaya instinctively did too, but she didn't see anything or anybody. Tamaya still remembered her first day at Woodridge. She'd been in 2nd grade and Marshall had been in 4th. He had helped her find the classroom, pointed out where the girls' bathroom was, and personally introduced her to Mrs. Thaxton, the head mistress. The new school had seemed like a big, scary place to her, and Marshall had been her guide and protector. She'd had a secret crush on him all through 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades. Maybe it still lingered a little bit inside of her, but lately he'd been acting like such a jerk, she wasn't sure she even liked him anymore. Beyond the soccer field, the ground sloped down unevenly toward the chain-link fence that separated the schoolyard from the woods. As they moved closer to the fence, Tamaya could feel her heartbeat quicken. The air was cool and damp, but her throat felt dry and tight. Just a few weeks before, the woods had sparkled with bright fall colors. Looking out the window for her classroom on the 4th floor, she was able to see about every shade of orange, yellow, and red, so bright some days that it had looked as if the hillside was on fire. But now the colors had faded and the trees looked dark and gloomy. She wished she could be as brave as Marshall. It wasn't just the woods that scared her and what might or might not have been lurking within them. Even more than that, Tamaya was scared to death of getting in trouble. Just the thought of her teacher yelling at her filled her heart with fear. She knew the other kids broke the rules all the time, and nothing bad ever happened to them. Kids in her class would do something wrong, and then their teacher, Miss Filbert, would tell them not to do it, and then they do it again in the very next day and still not get in trouble. Still, she was sure if she went into the woods, something horrible would happen to her. Mrs. Thaxton might find out. She could get expelled. A dip in the rocky ground created a big gap, big enough to crawl through under a section of the fence. Tamaya watched Marshall take off his backpack, then push it through the gap. She took off her backpack too. Miss Filbert had once said that courage just meant pretending to be brave. After all, if you're not scared, then there's nothing to be brave about, is there? Pretending to be brave, Tamaya shoved her backpack through the gap. There was no turning back. Now who's the goody-goody, she thought. She wiggled under the fence, careful not to snag her sweater. And that's where we're going to pause today, friends. We read chapters 1, 2, and 3 of Fuzzy Mud. If you check back in later this afternoon, we're going to continue on with the next chapters. And I cannot wait to see what happens as they're in the woods. I'll check in with you guys later. Have a wonderful day. And I hope that you enjoy that sunshine. Bye, my friends. See you later.